website, thepostersquad.ca. Stay tuned for the METIS Matters Radio program, but first, I thought this would fit.
It fits.
This is from Kathleen's band, Viper Centro. Blood Vein Breakdown, Reg Bouvet.
It's actually nice.
Yeah.
Oh, I haven't seen that one.
Yeah, that's one of her regular bands, Viper Central. I play a song called Losing My Mind on it an awful lot because it's bluegrass and it has a horn section in it. It's really funny. It's bluegrass and it goes all Latin. It's pretty funny.
So what's the song called?
It's called Blue Vein Breakdown, I think it's called.
Blue Vein Breakdown?
Yeah, it's a Reg Bouvet song. Yeah,
Oh, Blood Vein.
Blood Vein, yeah.
Blood Vein
That's why I
Breakdown.
wanted to mention Reg Bouvet.
Reg Bouvet.
Or Bouvet, whatever. Bouvet, Bouvet. Bouvet!
Reg Bouvet.
Bouvet! Bouvet! Stupid English people.
So it's actually Reg that did this one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought, yeah, I gotta open up the show. Oh, we're here already.
Just like that. Welcome to METIS Matters Radio on CFRO 100.5 FM, and I'm your host, Eric White Sky Cloud, talking to you in beautiful downtown Vancouver. Actually, it's raining like heck out there, and I'm sure everybody's getting all covered up and be trying to stay warm, so to speak, because actually it's quite cold out there. And I've had people complaining, going, hey, it's so cold out here. Well, you live in the street, folks. If you're a street person, they're not acting cold because they're so used to being climatized. So people like us, when we're so caught up in our way of living and we're in our house and we're trying to stay warm, we just have to appreciate what we've got. Today, actually, the song that played earlier this afternoon, actually, this evening, actually, the guy's name is Reg Bouvet, and he actually played the song called Blood Vein Breakdown. So just let you know, folks out there, if you want to see it, it's actually on the CD called Viper Central, The Spirit of God and Madness, and there's a variety of other types of show, or actually musicians that are playing off of it. So it's actually, if you want to find out about this, you can always
Kathleen Nisbet.
Yeah, by Kathleen Nisbet. You can always get a hold of her, Kathleen Nisbet, Nisbet. You can get a hold of her, and she can actually say, "I've got a CD. Here it is." So that's a great song. It's a good song because it's a great song to introduce with. Because normally, most of the time, we always use the Red River Jig as an intro, but we always like to change it up a little bit. Just to confuse you guys. Just to confuse you.
Keep it interesting.
Yeah. We're always sitting on top of the world.
Predictable is boring.
Oh, God. What can I say? Anyways, today we've got a really interesting thing to share with you folks. I find it very concerning for me. It actually comes from my heart. But I want to talk about a few more things first before we get started on this one. We are looking for donations for our radio program, METIS Matters Radio. And because we're working as a non-commercialized radio station, which is the co-op radio, we would like to, I'm actually asking for donations to help keep METIS Matters Radio going. So folks, if you're able to give us a hand, we'd love to hear from you. And, if you want to be basically, say, a monthly membership, or you want to be an annual membership, or just even just that, because basically we're trying to cover is like $2,500 for that one whole year of our program. But what I've done earlier before is I put together another fundraiser trying to raise $6,000. The reason why I was trying to raise $6,000 because I wanted to make a whole bunch of advertisements and banners and many things, because basically what I'm trying to do is I want to advertise more of METIS Matters Radio out to so many events, and it does become costly when you're trying to create a brand new, I guess you say, a lot of media, and you have to make all these things. And so basically I was trying to create all this together. But I think first, I find it's important that I need to bring in at least $2,500 for this whole year for us, as a fundraiser for us, because we want to stay with METIS Matters Radio. Mr. Ken Fisher has had this program running since 1989, and bless his heart, he passed away this past December of 2017, and so now we really want to carry on. We've gone so far here. Now we're in the month of April, and so far everybody's pretty happy with the show, and I'm looking forward to sharing continuation of Métis Matters Radio, and a lot of news and reviews of Métis, whether it's history, events that are coming up, or even community events, community things that we need to find out. We need to share with the public what's going on. And now, one thing I do find is important that's also I want to share with you folks. You'll see on my hat here, I want to also basically make a great shout out to everybody in our Facebook page, in the chat room. We're live in the studio. I have some of the, we call it baseball caps or Métis hats, and it says Métis on there, so if you guys or anybody's interested in wanting to buy some of these hats, we have these hats available for you, and they're $20, so if you guys are interested and want to order one, just let me know. And it's a beige and blue brim. It's actually pretty cool. I like it. And so if you're actually interested in wanting to order some of those hats, or you can contact the BC Métis Federation. They also have those hats as well as sashes or anything else available. Just give them a call, and I'm sure they'll be able to help you, because they're actually one of our major supporters of this program. We also want to let everybody know of anybody who actually wants to promote themselves as a musician. Like that's with Kathleen Nisbet. I wanted to get a hold of some of her music and play it on our program, just as well as JJ LaValle, and we've had other folks like Dallas Boyer, and also a group actually called Nicely Put Together, which is actually the song title was called Métis Man. I try to get as much Métis music as possible, like Art Bird, Renee Gervais, Renee Theron. There's so many CDs that I'm trying to bring in to play a variety of Métis music, and even anybody who's actually a new musician, who even is a guitar player or that sort of thing, is a Métis. We'd love to hear from you. We got some really great young people that I'm trying to get a hold of so we can get them to settle in and come in to join us in the studio here and interview them, and to let you know what's coming up in some of our future musicians. I mean, some of these people are really great songwriters, and as well as entertainers. We've had some really great people on our program, so we're looking forward to have you guys in, be part of this. Now, one thing that I want to share today, and it's actually about, we'll talk about this from the very beginning. Now, myself, I am a Métis artisan, so I do make, arts and crafts and that sort of thing, and I've been doing it for many, many years. And I'm sure a lot of you folks have actually come across in some of these stores, the dollar stores, or some of these events, and you'll see a non-native person actually selling, say, dream catchers, or saying, items, or selling items that look like native made or indigenous made, and yet you find out later they themselves are not indigenous, but they'll say they made it, or they'll say that somebody else made it. Now, basically what we're looking for is the proof of that person that actually made it, right? And if there's a signature, this is what we're trying to do, is make sure that anybody who's actually an indigenous artisan or crafter or carver, anyone like that, you have to find some sort of means of proving yourself who you are. And if you are an indigenous person, which is Métis, First Nations, or Inuit, that makes you just as having the rights to, sell what you are out there, because people need to see the real artisan, not somebody who's making fake jewelry or fake items. And lately, I was actually sent this column today, and even though it may have been written just a few days back or a few weeks back, but it's called "The Biggest Fake Native American Art Conspiracy Revealed," and a jewelry dealer, Nail Ali, will be the first defendant sentenced in the most extensive federal investigation into the Indian arts and crafts fraud. Now, that's actually in the USA. Now, in the USA, they have an Indian Arts and Crafts Act, which basically is, if you are caught selling something that maybe you made, that you're if you're non-native and you're trying to pass it off as an indigenous, you can be fined $5 million, Yes, folks, 5 million, as well as 6 months in prison. So in the States, they passed this act. We don't have this act in Canada. We really don't. We don't have this act to protect us. So what I had done was when we did the fusion, or sorry, not the fusion, but when we did the Klahowya Village in Stanley Park a few years back, and Keith Henry was the CEO of the Aboriginal Tourism BC, and now they call the Indigenous Tourism BC. But Keith Henry was actually, when I spoke to him, and we were set up in the park, as well as many other people who were selling their crafts and carvings. And you get a lot of tourism, a major amount of tourism. And you basically are trying to promote Métis culture, Métis history. You're trying to, and as well as First Nations, Inuit history. Like all that was included in the park. We did this for 9 weeks. Yes, folks, 9 weeks every day for 9 weeks. It was fun. It was the most beautiful, enlightening, healing for me and my wife. She was going through some personal stuff herself emotionally as well as mentally. And that helped her heal when we were in Stanley Park. Now, knowingly, Stanley Park is full of cedars and wonderful nature, and it's very peaceful when you go there. I'm sure a lot of you actually that are in the BC region actually love to go to Stanley Park all the time because it's very healing, and I love it. And people like to go for long walks or rides or ride a bicycle, you name it, but it's really beautiful. Anyways, part of Klahowya Village, we start noticing, tourists are coming in like crazy. They love, and the first thing they're going to ask you, is this native made or is this Indigenous made? Yes, it is, because we're trying to prove to the public this is real. Reason why, they've told us, some of them actually gone to Richmond, where there are some stores that are run by Chinese folks, Asian folks, run by South Asians, and they have our crafts, or I would say replicas of our items in their store, and they're trying to tell the public that we made it. And yet there's a freaking tag on the dream catcher or whatever it is and says China or Indonesia.
Made in China, yeah.
Or India,
yeah. Or Korea.
Or Korea. It's made, and now there's a whole bunch of new ones coming made in Saudi Arabia. Like, what the hell? They're making enough money as it is. Why are they chasing us? And this is the wrong Indian, so I swear. So anyways, it really hurt my heart to see this happen. And I had a chat with Keith about this, and I said, we need to do something to protect our crafts. What do you think we can do? He says, let me see what I can do. So he actually had to sit down with his board, with the BC, Average Tourism BC, Average Tourism BC. He sat with them, and they had an idea. So they start making signage, authentic Indigenous craft, or authentic Indigenous. So basically they're saying, look for this label. And they created a design with the feathers, and it says authentic Indigenous. So they were using stickers on our items, or they would use signs on our, so we can actually hang the signs to prove to the public this is authentic Indigenous. Now, it's a start. It's an absolute start. But this is something I've been trying to do for such a long, long time. And I was so happy that Keith and the board came up with it, and I thanked him so much for it. But we need to make the next step, folks, because we're still, I've had people come up to me at some of the shows that I do when I'm selling my wares, and they're saying to me, oh, I can make that, and I can sell that too. No, you're not. You're not. If you want to make it, don't, if you're non-native, don't tell me you're going to make it and sell it, because you don't have the right to do it, because you're stealing. It's a copyright, folks. Come on. It's a copyright. But there are people also who come up to me and say, well, can I make that, or can you teach me to make that? Well, no, that's my way of living. I'm not going to teach you unless if I'm making a drum, I'm selling a drum, and if they say, do you do drum classes? Yeah, I can teach you how to make a drum, because everybody across the world plays a drum, in all cultures, which is normal. But when it comes to spiritual practice or spiritual items that we have been passed down from generation to generation, the Ojibwe people were using the dream catchers, making them, and Lakota, the Cree, but they use them specifically to protect that person They're mainly made to help them heal or help them deal with their nightmares, and not just the dream catcher, but many other items that I make. I'm sure a lot of you have actually seen some things that I've done. But what I've actually noticed when I read this column, and the story was written by Mariah Cornell, and the time it was published was actually this past March 15, 2018. And I'll tell you the story. High in the Colorado Plateau in the northwestern New Mexico, a dusty main road runs through the pueblo of Zuni. Now, pull over to the side and someone in the threadbare clothing will soon approach your window holding out a mysterious little box. And in Los Angeles, where I live, such as an offering could only mean trouble. You'd be wise to roll up the window and make a quick getaway. But here in the homeland of Zuni people, it's safe to take a look. The box is lined with soft cloth, and in it, his own hands. In it, you'll find an exquisite creation this person made with his own hands. A travertine animal carving, silver earrings inlaid with Zuni's sun face motif, a corn maiden pendant of carved shell. The Zuni people rely heavily on hard-won earnings from hard-won. They wrote hard-worn. Hard-won earnings from handmade jewelry and crafts. The tourism department of Zuni Pueblo estimates that 80% of the working adults there make arts and crafts for sale. Yet it's getting harder and harder for them to make a living. For as long as the Zunis and other indigenous artisans have sold their crafts, they've been undercut by fakes, non-natives posing as Indians to sell more of their work, factory-made goods sold as handmade. But today's fakes include a virtual torrent of knockoffs cheaply manufactured overseas and masquerading as genuine native-made. Baskets made in Pakistan, sold as Navajo. Beadwork made in China, sold as Plains Indian. Hopi Katsina dolls cranked out in the Philippines. None more profitable than counterfeit Indian Jai. The insult isn't just financial. Our arts and crafts give us a real concrete way to stay connected to our culture and our history, says the Navajo jeweler Liz Wallace. All this fake stuff feels like a very deep personal attack. But even though the rampant sale of counterfeits in Southwest has been widely acknowledged for decades and has ties to organized crime, according to affidavits by federal investigators, only recently has the U.S. government taken any serious action to shut down the major operators. Whether the crackdown has teeth will be tested in New Mexico in April, when Albuquerque, New Mexico dealer Nile Ali will be sentenced for fraudulently selling imported jewelry as Native American made. Ali, the owner of several retail stores in Albuquerque's Old Town district, pleaded guilty on October 18, 2017 to misrepresent the United States and Canada. According to federal investigators, two families running counterfeiting networks are both Palestinian, known to the law enforcement as Sterling Coalition, and Aishe Brothers. Now, the Sterling Coalition, the larger of the two, operates an importing company in Albuquerque called Sterling Islands, which is owned by Nashat Khalaf's brother, Jawad Khalaf, and niece Shida Khalaf. In affidavits filed in support of 18 search warrants executed in October of 2015. Investigators named these and other members of the Khalaf family and associates as participants in a scheme to import and fraudulently sell counterfeit Native American jewelry manufactured in a factory in the Philippines called Fashion Accessories for You. Jawad Khalaf and his son Nadar have owned the factory since at least 2006. None of the Khalafs have been charged yet. Albuquerque lawyer John Boyd, who represents Nashat Khalaf and Al Zuni Global Jewelry, calls the allegations against his client wrong. The business and his owner, he said, is in an email, have supported Native American artisans for decades, maintain good relationships with them, and provide the most important outlet in the area for Native Americans to sell their work. Al Zuni and Khalaf deny that they have ever attempted to pass off or have passed off any jewelry as Native American, Navajo, Zuni, Hopi, or any other tribe when it is not. Mark Baker, another Albuquerque lawyer who represents Jawad Khalaf and Sterling Islands, emailed that his clients certainly deny that they have violated the law or otherwise engaged in any deceitful conduct. This is a family of people known in the community as honest and responsible. Law enforcement estimates that Sterling Islands has imported into the U.S. contraband jewelry worth of $11,800,000 in wholesale value between October 2010 and October 2015. According to court records, retail buyers, wholesalers would place orders for replicas of particular pieces of genuine jewelry and pick them up at Sterling Islands. The four Aishe brothers running the other alleged conspiracy, Imad, Nadal, Yayad, Indian art stores were raided in New Mexico and California, including two of Nael Ali's Albuquerque stores in Gallup 8 and Galleria Azul. The Indian Arts and Crafts Board estimated in 2016 that the retail value of 350,000 pieces of jewelry were seized during the raid and exceeded over $35 million. Operation Al Zuni was conducted by the Office of Law Enforcement of the Southwest Region of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and funded through an agreement with the Indian Arts and Crafts Board, an agency within the U.S. Department of Interior tasked with the developing and promoting arts and crafts as a source of income for American Indians, Canadians, and Alaska Natives, as well as as enforcing the Indian Arts and Crafts Act. Other Southwest dealers fear that the prosecutions against business owners accused of peddling fakes make for bad publicity, and that customers and collectors concerned about getting ripped off will avoid shopping for Indian arts and crafts altogether. Justin Winfield of the Winfield Trading Company, a larger buyer of Indian jewelry and crafts located on the highway between Gallup and Zuni, disagrees, fanning out the thick stack of newspaper articles he'd collected since October 2015. He told me that last July that he thought the ongoing prosecutions were already having a positive impact, that buyers or retail stores were taking greater care to ensure authenticity. A few spooked customers in the short term and a price Winfield is willing to pay if it means curbing the influx of fakes. It hurts to take the thorn out, he said, but after it's out, you can heal up. William Woody, who championed his agency's investigations into Indian arts and crafts fraud when he was chief of law enforcement at the Fish and Game Wildlife Service, thinks Operation Al Zuni has just scratched the surface. At a Senate field hearing last July, Woody's final day on the job, he said, "We have not begun to take a comprehensive look into the markets for other Native American items in the Southwest, including pottery, paintings, blankets, etc., where there is likely similar fraudulent activity. In order of things to change," wrote of the editors, the Gallup Independent. Now, the federal government, as well as attorneys generals in states like New Mexico and Arizona, must get a lot tougher on these frauds. The sentencings of Nael Ali and Mohammed Manasra, who have confessed to knowingly dealing in fakes for both alleged networks, will test how tough New Mexico judges are willing to be. Manasra isn't facing prison time, but Ali, who pleaded guilty to a felony, faces up to 18 months in prison and could be the first person ever to go to jail for violating the Indian Arts Act. Prosecutors have requested that the sentencing in Albuquerque Albuquerque of Ali and his co-defendant Mohammed Manasra he be on the same day in April, so that any Native American artisans who wish to be heard by the court won't have to travel twice. Now's the time for these artists to come forward, says Special Agent George Nicholas Chavez, who supervised the Fish and Wildlife Services investigation. Now, when I looked at the item itself, one of the pictures, they have photographs of some of the items that they're actually replicating. One is the silver and turquoise and coral rings. And this is what these guys are doing. They're actually replicating them in another country, and they're bringing them back. Now, there is a difference in some of the silver in another country that's made compared to here. But this is what they're doing. They're making these rings and selling for the same price as you would if you're actually living in Arizona and buying this. Now, they're saying it's native made. It's not native made. Never was. So I'm actually putting the word out for all of you listeners out there and people that are, letting you know, because we have the same problem here. And I'll tell you why. You know, when you take great pride in what you make, and I take great pride in my crafts, I always do. And anybody that buys anything of mine, I've always really wanted to let the public know, you know, that it's that it's Indigenous made, and they could take that home with them, no matter what country they go to, whether it's in Canada or across the world. But there are some examples, what I am looking for, and what I would like to say that should be done. Number one, I mean, I've been watching some of these stores actually they're making money off of our culture. And for example, if you go to the dollar store, and you'll see them selling dream catchers, and it says China, and it says according to Indian myth. We're not a myth, folk. We're still here. And then Tandy. I mean, yes, Tandy's a leather store, and they sell leathers and supplies, but they're also selling packaged dream catchers. You assemble them yourself, but what gives them the right to package this and sell it from their store? And I questioned them on that. I said, what gives you the right to do this? You have no right to do this. You're actually teaching someone our culture, but just basically saying, here's the instructions how to make a dream catcher. Excuse me, is it Indigenous, or are you just, you know, because you're making money on our culture? And that's exactly what they're doing. They didn't know what to say. And they said, well, we're told by our head office that we can do this. Well, so I wrote to the head office, and the head office is in the States. Okay.
I haven't listened since Harper destroyed it.
Okay, yeah, Harper did destroy it down there. He actually almost bought the bloody place. He was going to shut it down completely. But that was another story in itself. But and those of you who actually ever watched Dragon's Den, it's about people that come forward to these 5 or 6 rich people, millionaires, and you invest in them, or get them to invest in you, that you can make something or sell something that you can make them profit. Well, a couple of years back, there was a Métis fellow from Manitoba who actually has a company called Manitoba Moccasin, and he actually approached them on the Dragon's Den, and he wanted $250,000 and a percentage of them making money. And he told them, and I watched the show, he said that he's got First Nations women doing all the sewing to make the moccasins. And he brought in some samples, and they had a couple of First Nations ladies with him, and they're the ones that made the moccasins, the beautiful vamps. The vamps are what you have in front of your, it's right in the top of your toes, all nicely beaded, and it's nicely designed, including the tall, like the mucklucks. And these are supposed to be the ladies that actually made them. He got the money. Great. They're all happy. I would say probably within the year, he decided to save himself some money. Instead of hiring more First Nations people like he was supposed to, he downsized the First Nations people, let them go, and he actually had people to make templates. And he got the templates to cut out all the leather, whatever's done. Yes, he contracted China to make them because he thinks it's cheaper. So what people are doing, they're saying that they're Native owned or Métis owned or First Nations owned. Doesn't make them, like, you don't know. Yes, it could be owned, but who's making these pieces? Okay? Who's making the pieces? Is it the family that's making the pieces? Or who are you hiring to make them? This is what so this man lied. He lied to everybody. He lied to them on TV. Friends of mine were down there. They said, yeah, because a friend of mine who actually has a store who actually bought all bought the Manitoba moccasin mucklucks and the high toes, and he brought them in the store, and he thought, why does it say China on the box? And apparently that label was supposed to be removed, but it wasn't. So then he thought, I wonder. So he got into the boot and he rolled it back. And inside the lining of that boot, just before the curvature of the foot, there's a label sewn on there, and it says Made in China. So what does that tell you, folks? Is it really Indigenous made? And all you're really doing is, if you're saying your First Nations owned, does not make you who you are. So I tell people when it's Indigenous made, that's what it means, Indigenous made. I don't care if you're Indigenous owned, but it should say in your business, it should say Indigenous owned and Indigenous made. But for some reason, that's how people get away with it. Another person that I know of, I'm not going to mention their names, but they're also a First Nations business of their own. They decided to create their own little catalog, and they're doing piecework. So I thought they were hiring First Nations people to do piecework. It's like elders and that sort of thing. They did that before. But one of the guys who actually has a store, they asked him to come down to the warehouse to see all of their stuff. So he went down to the store, to the warehouse. And again, this is supposed to be an Indigenous-owned business. He went down to the warehouse, walked in. There were 20 South Asian, East Indian women doing piecework, from featherwork to dream catchers, in the warehouse. Yes, folks, our people were hiring South Asians because they're cheaper as labor and they're getting paid for piecework. What's happening is that, for some reason, I don't know what's going on, but I find that very offensive, very heartbreaking, that our people are pushing our elders back. They should be hiring